Alright guys, I'm out here working on the 67 Chevelle, installing the Wilwood front disc brake kit. You can see I've got all the parts laid out here. Wilwood does a good job packaging everything, shipping everything you need with it, so kudos to them. See all the hardware, nuts and bolts, washers, shims, bearings, pretty much everything you need to install the kit is here. So first thing to do when installing one of these kits on your Chevelle or really any car is to make sure that your wheel hubs line up with the bolt pattern or the offset on your wheels that you're installing. So let me show you how to do that. So these are the 5 lug wheel hubs that came in the kit, and first thing I want to do is make sure that they line up with the wheels that came on the car. So you get these out. Of course the studs aren't installed, so I went ahead and started threading them in. You can see there's 2 different bolt patterns here. So one of these is rounded and the other's got the flat top to it. You can see I'm installing these studs in the hole that has the flat top to it, and that is the bolt pattern you want to do for a 67 Chevelle or really a early GM A body. That's your 5 lug offset there. So once you have the 5 lugs installed in the proper hole, so that is the one with the flat top here, then you can take your hub over to the wheels you're going to run and make sure that they line up properly. So before you get to torquing everything down, this is best practice. Simply just stick it in the wheel, check to make sure everything lines up. You can see mine does here. So we are ready to start the install. There's quite a few steps you have to go through before you can actually start installing the kit on the vehicle. So first thing you want to do is take those studs and you want to install them in the hubs. So this is the other hub. You can see fresh out of the box here. And I'm going to go ahead and install the studs in the holes with those flat tops in them. So I'll go ahead and get that started, and then I'll come back. Alright, so I've got the studs installed in the hub. Got the hub sitting here in my vise. You can see I put rags on either side just not to mar it up. And I'm going to go ahead and put some Loctite on each one of these studs before I start torquing it down. And I'll just go ahead and run each of these down by hand. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and torque each of these studs, and all 5 of these get torqued down to 77 foot-pounds. Alright, now with everything torqued, I've got the rotor out, and you can see I've got the black powder coated one. This is the part number for it there, 160-7099. And then this is your rotor adapter. So this is what adapts from your hub to the rotor. You see the part number here, 300-3307. And this gets installed on the face of the rotor that does not have the dished indent in it. You can see just like I have it here, your bolts for this are going to come from the back side through to the adapter. So I'll get those out, and their part number is 230-12121. These are 5/16-18. So I'll get these installed, and then I'll come back. Alright, so I'm back. I actually flipped the rotor around, so you can see I got the dish side facing me now. The Torx head bolts are going through from this side into the adapter. And I went ahead and put some Loctite on each of these before I installed them. So they are all ready to be torqued. And all these bolts get torqued down to 25 foot-pounds. So I'll go ahead and torque them. And just for reference, on these Torx bolts, they are all T40s. Now it's tough to see here. Let me see if I can't adjust the camera a little bit. There it is. T40. Alright, so now I've got the wheel bearings out of the packaging. See, the part number for these is 370-0879. These are your inner hub bearings. You also have the outer hub bearings as well, but all four of these bearings need to be packed with some wheel bearing grease. So I've got some high temp, red and tacky grease here, and I'm going to go ahead and pack these bearings by hand. So I'll throw on some gloves, and I'll show you that. So it's pretty straightforward, the process. Pretty much you want to take some of your grease, put it in the palm of your hand, and once you got a nice glob sitting there, you want to take the bearing itself, and you're going to work the grease up into the bearing. So you'll slide it on the palm of your hand until you see it squirting out the other side of the bearing. You see it starting to come out here. It's a little bit of a messy job, but it's just part of it. So I'll go ahead and finish packing this, and then we'll come back. Alright, now that the bearing's packed, they're ready to be installed into the hub. So, take my bearing. You want to stick it in cone side down. So the nice thing is Wilwood's already installed the outer race inside the hub. You don't have to worry about installing it there. Once you've got the bearing packed, stick it in there, and then we need to install our outer seal. Alright, so here's the seal, part number 380-0927. These things are pretty easy to bend up, so you just want to be careful as you're installing them. So pretty much what I'll do is once I get it in place, you want to just take a mallet and very lightly tap it into place. So like I said, you can bend these seals up pretty easily. Okay, now with the seal in place, we can go ahead and install our hub assembly to the rotor. So the hub installs on the non-dished face of the rotor, just like this. And you see you got some more Torx bolts here. Part number 230-3829. So these are going to install from the back side of the rotor adapter into the hub. I'll throw some Loctite on them and get these torqued down as well. Alright, so once again, flip the rotor around. There's the hub face. I've got the 5 bolts holding the hub to the hub adapter installed with Loctite. So now I'm going to go around and torque these all down. And these 5 bolts get torqued down to 25 foot-pounds. So I don't think I need to show you that. I'll go ahead and torque it, and then I'll take both of these assemblies out to the car for install. Alright, so out at the frame here, and we're going to get rolling. So the first thing we need to do is take this bracket. You can see the part number there. These are provided by Wilwood. And these connect the spindle of the vehicle to the Wilwood provided brake calipers. So that's the bracket there. So we'll go ahead and remove this bolt. Same thing with these lower bolts. And that way we can replace them. Here's the part number for the bolt kit that comes with Wilwood. So they send you all new bolts and shims to replace at least the 2 factory ones there. So pull out this upper one, and we'll also remove the lower forward bolt for the spindle. And I gotta grab my hammer because the bolt is in there pretty good. Alright, so Wilwood recommends taking 3 shims initially and placing them behind this bracket when you go to install it. You can see on the back side here, line the 3 shims up, and we will install the bolt, which also is provided by Wilwood. And you want to place that through the spindle, and then of course there's a nut that goes on the back side there. And then on the upper side, to replace that bolt, there is a bushing, black bushing that's included in the Wilwood kit that sits behind this bracket and provides your proper spacing between the bracket and the spindle. And then Wilwood also provides the bolt. It's a tapered bolt that fits right at the top of the bracket here, just like that. So no shim at the top, and then Wilwood recommends putting 3 shims at the bottom to start. And I just realized I forgot to put a washer behind that lower bolt head, so I'm going to have to pull that back out and put that washer behind it. And I dropped my shims, so get them shoved back up behind the bracket. Slide the bolt back through, put the washer in place. Then I can put the nut on the back side and get this thing tightened down and take a look at it. Alright, so I'll tighten the lower spindle bolt. I'm not going to torque these quite yet, just get them snug. Next, I will tighten the upper bolt for the spindle, the one with the bushing behind it. Get that thing snug. Now we can go ahead and get ready to install the rotor. And really the goal here is to make sure that the rotor is parallel in alignment with that rear bracket there, because that's what's going to hold your caliper in position relative to the rotor. So pretty much what you want to do is just slide the rotor into place, and then you can install your outer bearing with the castle nut on the outside to tighten up that rotor in place to check your alignment. And then I'll take the nut and drive that in place just to get it tightened up. And let me bring the camera up just to kind of show you what I'm seeing here. So you can see the bracket at the top is tighter to the rotor than it is the bottom down here. So our gap is actually larger at the bottom than it is at the top. So that means that I need to add a shim at the bottom of that bracket where we currently have 3. I'm going to have to add at least one more to get that thing moved closer to the rotor. So I'll pull this back apart and add an additional shim there. Alright, so additional shims going back in. We've got 4 shims now behind this bracket. We'll get this bolt back through. That's shim stack up. To grab something to help me get these pushed up in there and aligned. There we are. Alright, so now I can put everything back together again, and we'll check our alignment. Okay, so with the rotor back in place, come back in and you can see my alignment now is pretty much parallel there. The gapping from the top to the bottom of the rotor and the bracket is pretty much even. So we're good to go ahead and get this thing fully installed. So with that said, now that I've got the final mock-up done, I've got to pull the rotor back off for a final time, and I've got to put Loctite on all of these bolts down here before I do my final assembly. So shift the camera back over, I'll pull out the upper and lower bolts, throw some Loctite on them, and this will hopefully be the last time installing this. This upper bolt gets torqued to 120 foot-pounds. And I'll throw some Loctite on this lower nut, and this gets torqued down to 65 foot-pounds. Now, since I have a new spindle on the vehicle, I also have to tighten down my rear spindle bolt. So that's what I'm doing here. So I threw some Loctite on that and torqued it to 65 foot-pounds as well. Now with everything torqued, Loctited, we can reinstall our rotor. So you want to make sure you've greased your spindle really well and then throw the rotor into place. And once you have the rotor in place, there's a washer, you can see the part number here, that goes behind the nut for the rotor. So I'll go ahead and slide that in place. See, it only goes one way. And with that installed, we put our castle nut on. And with the castle nut in place, the torque procedure for the wheel bearing is while you're rotating the rotor, you want to torque that nut down to 12 foot-pounds. So, see, rotating here while I torque, and once we hit 12 foot-pounds, what you want to do is back off one flat on that castle nut and install your cotter pin. So I rotate around a few times, make sure I'm at 12 foot-pounds, and then I'll back it off. Alright, cotter pin is in, and now all we have to do is install the dust cap. It just screws into place. Alright, last thing I need to do on this side now is install the brake caliper and brake pads. So here is the part number for the caliper. See, we have the red ones. And I'll flip the camera around, and that way you can get a good view at the installation process for this. So the goal is to shim this caliper so that you get even spacing on either side of the rotor. So kind of similar to how we did with the bracket relative to the rotor, we'll shim the caliper so that it's sitting evenly and the brake pads are contacting that rotor evenly on either side. And here is the bolt kit for the caliper. So Wilwood does include that in their kit. So with the bolt in place, I'll slide a couple shims. Wilwood recommends starting out with 2 shims and adjusting as needed. So I'll do 2 shims at both bolts. Alright, and then at the second bolt, same thing. Place 2 shims between the caliper and the bracket. Slide the bolt into place. And here's how it looks installed. So looks fairly even. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and tighten everything up and make sure that the brake pads are going to slide into place as is. Alright, so you can see on the outside of the caliper, the clearance is too close between the caliper and the rotor to get that front brake pad or that outside brake pad in. So what I'm going to have to do is remove a shim between the caliper and the rotor in order to move it out. That way I can get that outside caliper in. So I'm going to loosen everything up, remove a shim, retighten everything, and make sure that that everything fits. Okay. So I removed the shim. Brake pads are going back in. And now I've got the clearance on either side. Things are pretty even there. So now what I can do is pull those caliper bolts back out for the final time. I'll put some Loctite on them. I'll install the cotter pin. Slide that in now. That goes through the caliper into both brake pads and then out the back. So put that in place, Loctite everything, and good to go on this side. Alright, and these caliper bolts both get torqued down to 40 foot-pounds. So I'll torque both of these, and then this side is done, and I will move to the driver's side. Alright, so on to the driver's side. The process is the same, rinse and repeat. So I'll try to speed this up a little bit, but same exact process of getting the correct gapping between your caliper bracket and the rotor, installing all of that, making sure everything's torqued, and then once you go to install your caliper, making sure you got the right clearance to install your brake pads, that's gapped appropriately. So I'll speed this up a little bit, but yeah, same process on this side. Alright, so this time the gapping actually worked out for me between the caliper bracket and the rotor. You see here, got about the same clearance between the top and bottom. I ended up doing 4 shims here, so good to go. I'll pull everything back apart, Loctite it, get it torqued, and can move forward from there. Alright, so that is it. I have the driver side installed. Brake pads are fitting. And one thing I did want to mention here is you can see the bolts have to not protrude past the end of the bracket when you're installing them into the caliper. I know I didn't mention that on the other side, but you have to confirm that they are not protruding through, because there is the potential they could rub up against your rotor. So if you have to, you can add shims as necessary to prevent that. So I hope this helps everybody out. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll also be doing a video on the rear disc brake install on the same vehicle with the Wilwood kit. So I'll be posting that up shortly. But thanks again. Hope everybody enjoyed.